Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Peralvis, and this is the second video in my multi-video series on racism at the Upper Grand District School Board, trying to solve problems with the Upper Grand District School Board, and a case study based on my firsthand experience going through that process after identifying a racial slurs used during a June 16th meeting that they've since deleted from the internet. Thankfully, I had a backup. I've written all this out, so I'm going to get into it. Spoiler alert, I want to show this how it went. So this took the whole summer. I started trying to solve this problem in early July, I believe. July 3rd, I think, is the date of my first email. And I just want to make sure. June 22nd. So June 22nd is when this started. And over the summer, there's been lots of emails. There are emails I'm not showing here. There are emails that are just, they don't really matter. They're just kind of procedural. I'm trying to show the emails that matter. I'm trying to tell the story in the most succinct way, but I want to show you how long it took to set up these meetings and what was discussed and not discussed. And the follow-ups that happened and the attempts to solve this problem were more than once. I didn't just send an angry email. I tried genuinely to engage with these people to solve this problem. I believe honestly that this is a damaging change, and it's only a recent change. I'll show you, my audience. Here's the old, Here's the old 3-year equity plan. This was in place until the end of the school year 2019 to 2020, which is the school year we were in last year, is when the new one took place. The new one took over, and for some reason I can't scroll. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, the new one took over, and this is the current equity plan, 2019 to 2022, and it uses undefined language. Undefined language is very dangerous, and it's using undefined language such as anti-black racism, toxic masculinity, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. These are undefined, but being used in policy. This is concerning. Being used in equity plans, right? And the use of critical race theory in driving policy is also concerning. So I'm gonna look at all of that. I'm gonna look at what they themselves say in this June 16th meeting about how much data they have about racism in the board. It's not much. They don't have a lot, and there isn't a lot of racism to speak of anyway. Of the data that they do have. And when they have so little data yet make very strong statements, well, we're going to get to that right now, because let's get started. Fundamentally, this is the first part of the whole. I'm going to have to do a video tomorrow that shows the resolution of this and the fact that the Upper Grand District School Board knows exactly all of this information and they don't care. Okay? Martha Rogers doesn't care. Here we go. Upper Grand District School Board case study, the short version. This isn't really the short version. We're going to be using the long version too. Here's the long version and part 2. Okay, so here we go. When I sent the email that kicked this whole thing off, my intention was to find out how much, if any, racism was actually happening in the Upper Grand District School Board. I've worked at the Upper Grand District School Board, and I understand that the already robust training that the staff go through. In the June 16th meeting, when asked exactly how much racism is there in our board and what data do we have on it, they said they have a little bit of anecdotal data about racism in the board. And here it is. Here we go.
About language. Data on specific racism, I believe, was your question. Do we have data on specific racism? We have a little bit of anecdotal data from the data diversity survey that was done, but we do not have a lot of substantial data on specific incidences of racism. We have suspension and expulsion data and why people were suspended and expelled, and if there were incidences of racism or hate crimes. We do have that information. That stat is less than 5. That data comes to me each year. And we are, though, when we move to the next part of the presentation, going to share with you some ways that we are going to get that data and look specifically at what it looks like in the Upper Grand District School Board.
So without data, without any kind of data to back up what they're saying, the board says this on their website, and the link to the website is there, but it's the Upper Grand District School Board Equity and Inclusive Education, Anti-Racism. It says, anti-Black and Indigenous racism is deeply rooted in our community, our society, institutions, and our history, and much work needs to be done to address this systemic racism. As an educational community, we have a responsibility to identify and describe racism and oppression and then work to dismantle it. That's going to be important in a minute. The Upper Grand District School Board is committed to disrupting systemic racism and oppression in all of its forms. We will implement ongoing mandatory anti-racism and anti-oppression training, so that's just an advertising. But fundamentally, with no data at all, they're saying this is a deeply rooted problem in our society and country and institutions, etc. And how are they going to justify this? How are they going to find this data? Well, they're going to find it because critical race theory demands it, right? So here it is. What I uncovered while trying to address this issue was nothing short of shocking. From board trustees lying to other trustees about me to blatant racist statements from Upper Grand staff made during public meetings, this is a short version of a much longer version of me trying to solve a problem about racism and racist statements with the Upper Grand District School Board. They say they have a responsibility to identify and describe racism and oppression and then work to dismantle it. I identified clearly racist statements made by board members and trustees. I had very clear concerns and I articulated them correctly to the appropriate people at the Upper Grand District School Board. I was totally shut down from being able to address any real issues. I could barely get simple questions like, what is the working definition of racism that the board is using to generate policy and plans answered, never mind addressing the core issues that I was trying to discuss with them. It was very frustrating. I'm presenting this as a case study on my firsthand experience with problem solving a disturbing issue on racism with the Upper Grand District School Board. I will try and be as brief as possible. It will be told with email screenshots, public meetings, and other media. The emails have had personal information removed. That's the email address. These people were using Upper Grand District School Board addresses, operating in their official capacity, communicating with me, trying to solve a problem that is available on a public meeting. And I have confirmation that the June 16th meeting is public and can be shared from Catherine Van Utenstein. Oh, I can't remember how to say her name, but the Superintendent of Equity and Diversity. So just in case you're concerned or wondering, I've dotted my T's and crossed my I's. Wink. Okay, moving on. What I was trying to address specifically when contacting the Superintendent of Education was I was concerned about the board violating the Education Act, Section 169(1). A1. And 169(1)(A1) says, every board shall promote a positive school climate that is inclusive and accepting of all pupils, including pupils of any race and ancestry, place of origin, etc., etc. The thing that I'm concerned about currently is race. And you'll see why in just a minute. Number 2, concerned about critical race theory being used in the creation of policy or plans. Number 3, concerned about the use of racial slurs by Upper Grand District School Board staff in a presentation to the Board of Trustees. And the slur was, any system created by white folks is inherently racist because it was created by white people. And that was... I've had lots of, we've seen that a lot, so I'm not going to play it again. I've made a formal complaint to HR about the conduct of the staff who said this. I've removed that information from these emails because I just don't think it's really relevant. But I did make a formal complaint about this because I don't think that it's appropriate to go around saying all systems created by any race are inherently anything because they were created by that race. I mean, collective guilt? Is collective guilt something that we're all, everybody who has white skin is guilty of? Apparently, according to these people, and I don't think that's appropriate for a school board. So I've made an HR complaint because that violates basic human rights. That violates your basic dignity. And it's very, very frustrating. Okay. Trustees are violating their code of conduct and are not being held accountable by their board. And trustees are using racist slurs in Upper Grand District School Board emails and will not answer questions about their meaning. So we'll get to that point in the story. That's a fun one. That's its own video. Spoiler alert. Robin Ross, trustee of Wellington North and chair of the SFLAG committee. And, well, we'll have a special video about that. So that's coming soon. You can skip ahead, though, if you want to do the reading. Okay. Items of concern that were addressed. Complaint to HR regarding the racist language used during a public meeting was taken by the superintendent in charge of that. I've not heard an update. She said that it would be addressed in the fall, yet the staff member continues to work at the board office during the summer months. She worked there, the person who said the quote that I've been saying, all systems created by white people, blah, 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 are inherently racist, right? Because created by white people. That person has been working at the board office all summer. It's interesting how an HR complaint about a racial slur used in a public meeting to board trustees results in no action taken. Oh, well, very interesting. So here is, I'm going to scroll down again, notable things about the statement made by Miss Klein, and that is the person who made these statements originally in the June 16th meeting. Notable things about them. She says she's an education lead at the Upper Grand District School Board, and she states that they will do the training to make sure everyone understands the language of critical race theory. She states clearly that individual acts of racism are not seen, and she says we may not see that twice. And that backs up the data from earlier in the presentation that we just listened to about the lack of evidence of racism in the Upper Grand District School Board. Less than 5 people suspended for hate crime. At what level would it qualify for being racist? And what level would the Upper Grand District School Board record a situation if the child wasn't suspended for it? Would the child need to be kicked out of class? Did the teachers need to report situations of racism to this equity committee in order to make sure we quash it while they ignore blatantly racist education leads who are making racist statements to board trustees who then applaud? It's very, very strange. Number 2, she states, number 3, during the June 16th meeting, they did not come up with any examples of racism in the Upper Grand District School Board. What policies or procedures were racist? They identified one situation where a teacher at a high school expressed concern over a student's lack of bathing and personal care. He was told that was racist. From a child protection standpoint, however, the reason that they said it was racist was because different standards of grooming and personal care apply to different races, apparently, and not knowing that was racist of the teacher, and then expecting the student to come to class bathed and personally groomed as his peers or her peers was racist too. And I come from a child protection background. I come from family and children's services background. So I know right away that not having a child that doesn't have the proper personal grooming and bathing habits in a high school, that's a red flag of maybe they don't have the capacity to have that. Maybe they don't have access to that. Maybe there's a problem that needs to be looked at. It's not racism, and it's unbelievable that that's where we're going with this. So I was concerned. They're saying this is racist when in fact there could be potentially ignoring a child protection issue, and that's even more unbelievable, more egregious, right? Unbelievable. She references Dr. Kendi and states that no policies are neutral. They're either actively anti-racist, that is an undefined term, or they're upholding white supremacy and are therefore racist. My question is, and we'll see this in the email because I'm going to read it in a minute. But my question is, how is recess racist? Or lunchtime, is that racist? Or teachers' break time, is that also racist? You can't go down this path. It is not a good path to go down. It's not going to be successful. She again states that this is part of the plan. At the end of her tirade here, of her racist tirade in the middle of this board meeting, she says there's no wiggle room. She again states this is part of the plan after confirming that there's no wiggle room on these racist statements from the board. What is specifically anti-racist about lunchtime or recess, or are they inherently racist because they're part of a system built by white people? After watching that video, this is the response I sent back. Okay, so underneath all of the emails, I reproduce it with the links intact, so you can click the links. Any emails without links I didn't reproduce underneath because there's no real point. But anyway, here we go. So this is after watching the full 2-hour meeting, and I know this took me 15 minutes to get to this point, but there's so much groundwork that needs to be covered. I just don't see a way to make it shorter. And this is only the first video. There's a second video that's probably shorter, but this one's big. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, here we go. Hello, Cheryl. Thank you for providing the link. It is very informative. Here it is again for easy reference. And now that link is dead, by the way. You can't click on that link. It won't take you to a video. Okay, but I've backed it up. Regardless, I've watched through and made notes. I do have many more questions now than I had at the beginning of this. These are my preliminary questions that I'd like answered before we sit down to chat, so I'm fully prepared. Thank you for understanding. The most concerning time during the meeting is during 132:34 to 135-ish, where Kalinda was discussing what theories the new inclusivity and equity policies were based on. She said the following, emphasis mine, Okay, and I'm not going to go through this because I've quoted this ad nauseum, and we can listen to it anytime you want. The time indexed link is in the description if you like. It's right here.
Systems were all developed by folks who were white, that they are inherently racist in that. And so
yeah, I mean, that's racist, Kalinda. You can't say that. That's not explaining things to people who don't understand it. That's a racist rant. Okay, here we go. I have many questions. Here they are. What theory or school of thought was our inclusion and equity policy based on prior to this new critical race theory policy being adopted? Here it is. You can look for yourself. The superintendent did not provide this to me. I found this on my own because I'm on the FSLAC committee and I had the documentation and wherewithal to find it. Back to this. 2. Who or what body approved critical race theory as the foundation to base the new inclusivity and equity policies on? What process did it go through to replace the old policy? I'd like to contact this team if possible. Please include email to the work group. 3. What does it mean for the board to understand that race is a social construct? Please include links as much detail as possible. 4. What does it mean when the board says that systems built by white people are inherently racist because they are built by white people? To be clear, in the email I received that included the link to this meeting, Cheryl's final line is the Upper Grand District School Board stands by its statement. 5. Further playing this statement out, does that mean that a project completed by a white person is inherently racist because it was completed by a white person in the board's view? What about a team of white people? How big does the product have to be before it's racist? Is a team of white people capable of creating a non-racist, non-white supremacist upholding product, or is that tainted with white supremacy as well? 6. What, in the board's opinion, is an acceptable number of white people working on a project before it is seen as upholding white supremacy? I'm wondering about both students and teachers here. Is the number the same for teams of white students as it is for white teachers or administrators in the board's eyes, or is it different? If it's different, can you provide the board's rationale? 7. What, in the board's opinion, is the makeup of a well-balanced team to avoid upholding white supremacy in our new policies? Is this formula in place for the equity and diversity team tasked with creating these new policies? Is the formula successful at removing the upholding of white supremacy within systems that white people develop? What criteria is it measured by? Please share as much information as you can. 8. If the board believes, as stated, that nothing is neutral, either something is anti-racist or it's upholding white supremacy and therefore racist, how does the board view lunchtime? How about recess? How are math and music lessons upholding white supremacy in the board's eyes specifically? How about the teacher's break room? Is that upholding white supremacy in the board's eyes? This is important because there's clearly no wiggle room in the board's view. In the next line, Kalinda says folks get confused because they think there is a middle ground for neutrality, and there's not. These are important questions that need answers, as the timeline for implementation is September 2020. We're past that now. It's implemented with no definitions. Number 9, the policy necessitates making hiring about skin color and race. How is the board preparing to deal with that in the short term? If the answer is training, please see the next question. 10, what kind of training broadly will help a white woman, to use the speaker's words, hire in a way that is acceptable to these new policies and to Regulation 274, which mandates blind hiring to remove bias and seniority status? 1:23:25 minutes in the video. Please provide links to proposed training to be used in preparing for September 2020. They don't have that either. Back to this. Number 11, is it mandatory that the people doing the training be non-white? As Cheryl stated, the people leading this initiative must not look like her nor like Trustee Foley. That's 12406. Is that a standard the board can set for engaging with subcontracting training? Can the ownership of the business be white, or must the business that is engaged with also be owned by people of color? What about the parent company? What board policy governs this, and can you please provide me with a copy? As a board of education, how can you educate children with critical race theory as a starting point for policy? At 103, Kalinda states that 93% of the Upper Grand District School Board staff identify as white. I'm not sure of the exact makeup of the student population, but we live in a population that is a majority white. Does the board believe that it is reasonable to teach those children that any system that white people build is inherently racist? 13, the stated goal of the equity and inclusivity policy is to end all forms of racism. 320 in the video. Does the board believe critical race theory is the best available option action for achieving that goal. Please provide rationale that this will be successful at ending all forms of racism, and please provide alternatives considered and the reasons for removal, why they could not achieve success. 14. How can the board stand by the statement that racism is systemically rooted in our board and community without clear examples from both? In the presentation at 1:33:30, Kalinda states that we may not see individual acts of racism twice. When she talks about what racism the board is talking about, she says it's not individual acts of racism, it's systemic, and gives a vague list of how the structures, practices, procedures, and policies are racist, but never gives an example. At no point in the presentation is an example of systemic racism in the policies of the Upper Grand District School Board given. No Upper Grand District School Board policy was pointed to during the meeting that was racist at all. At 1 hour, 17 minutes, the trustee Benny, I don't know about the spelling there, sorry about that, asks directly, do we have any data of any kind of racism in our school? The response is at 1:19. We have a little bit of anecdotal from a diversity survey that was done. We do not have a lot of substantial data on specific incidents of racism. We have suspension and expulsion data on, and if these were incidents of racism or hate crimes, we have that stat is less than 5, or that's less than 5 too, right? I wonder how many, right? If we're basing the entire policy change on this minuscule stat, how many is it? Anyway, back to this. That info comes to the trustee each year. So how can the board release a statement that claims systemic racism is in fact every facet of Canadian systems, including the board, and not have one concrete example to share with trustees on June 16th, 2020? These are the preliminary questions I have before we have our meeting. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate that at the beginning of the meeting, it was clearly stated that all voices would be heard and respected. Really looking forward to the answers. When is a good time and date for you to meet? Thanks. I'm quite long-winded sometimes. This is the end of the email, so this is just me speaking again. Actually, I'm reading off here, so carrying on. I'm quite long-winded sometimes, but I feel like it's important. I never got very meaningful answers to those questions. I heard in the 2-hour-long meeting that they did not have any solid data backing up their claim about racism in the board at all. Here's Cheryl saying that during this June 16th meeting, and so there's a link if you want to follow it. I sent that email on June 22nd. I followed up on June 24th. After emailing the whole upper management team, including Martha Rogers, I got a response on June 27th. Here's the response. And Cheryl says, thank you for taking the time to watch the presentation. As I stated in my original email, I'm available through July and August and can meet in person at the board office, virtually or by phone to discuss your questions and the board's equity plan. My next available day is Friday, July 3rd in the afternoon. Let me know if that works for you, or send me some alternative dates and times. So initially, this was supposed to be, well, okay, you know what? I'm already 22 minutes in, and I'm going to call it here. The next video, we're going to go through the emails exchanged and the response from Martha Rogers that basically says, we've addressed your issue. They've not addressed my issue. My concerns remain unchanged. And even more grave, because we're using undefined language in our policies that vilify specific people, or could be toxic masculinity, or could be used in any way possible because they're undefined, right? I think this is dangerous precedent to set, and I think it's even more dangerous that people, and not just me, there have been multiple people who have brought multiple issues to this Board of Trustees and this Board of Education that have been shut down in the same way. But I think it's irresponsible for them to not listen to the public who is bringing them concerns, especially when they claim that they are trying to, when they say that as an educational community, we have a responsibility to identify and describe racism and oppression and then work to dismantle it, and then at the same time keep a education lead who makes lengthy racist rants to trustees during public board meetings as integral members of the equity and inclusion team, right? So that's very problematic. So the next video, and I'm going to get to it as fast as I possibly can, is going to go through the email exchanges and the rest of this story that it's just too long for one video. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please keep an eye out for part 3. That'll be coming up as soon as possible. I don't know if I have enough time to do another one right now, but we'll see. Maybe I'll do it right now. So if you're interested, it might be up sooner than you think. But I'm going to put this one up, and tell me what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.